My parents told me not to celebrate my daughter's graduation because welcome back. Hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe. Today's story will blow your mind. I never thought I'd have to defend celebrating my own daughter's success. It sounds absurd when I say it out loud. Even now, months later, the words don't make sense in my mouth. But that night, sitting in my car in front of my parents' house, I realized some things never truly leave you. No matter how many years pass, how far you move away, or how much you build a life that looks nothing like the one you came from. Somehow, you're still that child sitting at their kitchen table, waiting for permission to feel proud of yourself. It was a gray afternoon in late May, the kind that smells like wet concrete and lilacs. The sky had been threatening rain all day, hanging heavy and low, as if holding back just enough to keep us guessing. I'd taken the day off work to drive out to my parents' place, a neat little house on the edge of town where the streets were quiet and the mailboxes still had chipped paint from when my father used to fix them himself. It was supposed to be a quick visit, just a conversation, an invitation, really. But when my mother opened the door, I could already tell it wasn't going to go how I hoped. She had that look, the one that made me brace without even realizing it. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and she was wearing the same pale cardigan she always wore when she was nervous about something, but didn't want to say so. The smell of brewed coffee and lemon cleaner wafted out as she stepped aside to let me in. "Hi, Mom," I said, setting my purse down near the hall bench. "Is Dad home?" "He's in the den," she replied, her voice soft, almost cautious. "He's watching the news. You know how he gets around election season." I nodded, pretending that line still worked as an excuse for his moods. "Well," I said, taking a deep breath, "I actually came by to tell you something. Something good." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, and for a moment I caught a flicker of hope in her face. The kind that used to live there when I was a kid, bringing home good grades or art projects. She gestured toward the kitchen. "Let's sit down. I'll pour you some coffee." The kitchen hadn't changed in years. Same wallpaper, pale green with little flowers fading in the corners, and the same round wooden table, with one leg that always wobbled just enough to make the coffee ripple when you set it down too hard. I took a seat, watching her move carefully around the space like someone rehearsing old choreography. When she finally sat across from me, she folded her hands together and smiled. "So," she said, "what's the good news?" I couldn't help but grin. "It's about Emily." Her face softened instantly. My daughter, their only grandchild. Even with all the distance between us, they'd always asked about her. "How's she doing?" Mom asked. "She's incredible," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "She's graduating, top of her class, full scholarship offers from 3 universities. She decided on Redmond College. She'll start in the fall." My mother's eyes brightened, and for a heartbeat, I saw pure joy there. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Really, I'm so proud of her." "Thanks, Mom." I paused, smiling. "We're planning a little celebration next weekend. Nothing big, just friends, family, a few of her classmates. I wanted to invite you and Dad." The words had barely left my mouth before the silence changed. It was subtle but immediate, the kind of quiet that fills a room like smoke. My mother's expression faltered. She glanced toward the doorway where I could see the edge of the den and the flickering blue light from the television. "I don't know if that's a good idea," she said finally, her tone careful. I frowned. "What? Why not?" Her eyes darted again toward the den. "Your father, he feels strongly about certain things." "Certain things?" I echoed, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's her graduation, Mom. What things could he possibly feel strongly about?" She sighed and rubbed her temples. "He thinks you're pushing her too much, making her into something she's not." I blinked, confused. Something she's not? She's a smart, hardworking kid who earned her place. What does that even mean? Mom's lips tightened and she didn't answer. The sound of the television in the next room grew louder, some news anchor's voice blaring about inflation and politics. And I realized my father had probably been listening this whole time. "I'll talk to him," I said, standing up before she could stop me. The den smelled like old books and pipe smoke, even though he hadn't smoked in years. My father sat in his recliner, one slipper dangling from his foot, his attention fixed on the TV. He didn't turn his head when I entered. Dad, I said. He grunted in acknowledgement but kept his eyes on the screen. I just told Mom. Emily's graduating next week. We're having a little celebration and he muted the television, still not looking at me. You shouldn't do that. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. I shouldn't do what? Throw a party. Make a big thing out of it. My heart sank. Why? What's wrong with celebrating her? Finally, he turned to look at me. His eyes were steady, but there was something in them. A strange mix of judgment and something else I couldn't place. You know how I feel about flaunting success, he said. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. Dad, I said, incredulous. This isn't about flaunting anything. She worked her ass off for this. He shook his head. It's about humility. You're setting her up for disappointment. The world doesn't need another person who thinks she's owed something because she did well in school. She doesn't think she's owed anything. My voice rose despite myself. She just wants to celebrate. We both do. Then do it without us, he said flatly, turning back toward the TV. Something inside me cracked a little then. That small, bitter sound you don't hear but you feel somewhere deep. So that's it? I asked quietly. You won't even come? He didn't answer. I left the room before I said something I couldn't take back. My mother was standing in the kitchen doorway, wringing her hands. Please don't be angry, she whispered. You know how he gets. Yeah, I said, I do. The drive home felt longer than usual. The rain finally came down, streaking the windshield in uneven lines that blurred the streetlights. Emily was waiting when I got home. Sitting cross-legged on the couch, laptop open, music playing softly. She looked up as soon as I entered, her eyes bright with the kind of excitement that only 18-year-olds still have. How'd it go? She asked. I hesitated, then forced a smile. They're proud of you. Her grin widened. Good. I was worried Grandpa might say something about me moving so far. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. Not then. Not when she'd been working so hard to make this moment perfect. So I let the lie sit there between us like a harmless secret. But that night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. I scrolled through the list of invitees, friends, neighbors, teachers, everyone who had watched her grow up. I wanted to delete my parents' names, but my finger hovered over them for a long time. Old habits are hard to break. Some part of me still wanted their approval. The next morning, my father called. His voice was calm, almost measured, the way it always was when he'd already made up his mind. I need to talk to you, he said. Come by tonight, alone. There was a strange weight to those words, something that made my stomach twist. I agreed, even though every part of me didn't want to. When I arrived, the house was dim. Only the porch light was on. Inside, the TV was off for once. My father sat at the table with a folder in front of him. My mother wasn't there. What's this about? I asked, setting my purse down. He gestured to the folder. Before you go ahead with this celebration, I need you to see something. I opened it. Inside were old newspaper clippings, yellowed and brittle. At first, I didn't understand. They were about a car accident from 20 years ago, a local tragedy. A teenage boy killed on the night of his graduation party, drunk driver. The name jumped out at me, Ryan Keller. I looked up, confused. I remember this. He went to my high school. My father nodded slowly. His father worked with me, you remember? Kind of. What does this have to do with Emily? He leaned forward, eyes sharp. Everything. I frowned, waiting for him to explain. That night, he said quietly, you were supposed to be at that party. You begged to go, but your mother and I said no. I blinked, memory stirring. Yeah, you wouldn't let me. You said parties like that were dangerous. His expression didn't change. That party ended with one boy dead, 2 arrested, and another family destroyed. I saw what celebration does to people. It blinds them, makes them careless. It ruins lives. I stared at him, stunned. Dad, that was 20 years ago. I was 16. This isn't the same. It's exactly the same, he said. You're doing what we stopped you from doing. Pretending happiness is safe. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know what to say. Finally, I pushed the folder back toward him. I'm sorry that happened, but Emily isn't me, and I'm not you. We're celebrating her, not tempting fate. He exhaled sharply, a sound between frustration and fear. You think I'm overreacting, but you don't understand what happens when people start believing they're untouchable. I stood up. Dad, this isn't about me believing anything. It's about you being afraid of ghosts that don't belong to us. For a moment, his face softened, almost like he wanted to say something more, but he didn't. He just nodded toward the door. Then go. Just remember what I said. I left shaking, angry, and confused. The air outside smelled like rain again, and I could hear thunder somewhere in the distance. I drove home faster than I should have, my thoughts spinning. When I got there, Emily was in the kitchen, baking cupcakes for the party. The sight of her, hair tied up, music playing, flour on her hands, made something inside me unclench. Hey, she said, looking up. You okay? I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, just tired. She grinned. You should see the backyard. The lights came in today. It's going to look amazing. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that joy wasn't something dangerous, that happiness didn't need permission, but a small, uneasy part of me couldn't shake my father's words. That night, long after Emily went to bed, I stood by the window watching the rain. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the half-set decorations in the yard. Strings of lights swaying in the wind, the empty tables waiting for a celebration that suddenly felt fragile. And somewhere deep down, I couldn't help but wonder, what if my father was right? The rain stopped the next morning, but the air still felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I stepped out into the backyard with a mug of coffee, the grass damp beneath my shoes, the decorations glistening faintly in the early light. Emily had done so much already. The string lights she'd carefully measured, the folding tables she'd painted white, the mason jars she'd filled with fairy lights and daisies. It looked beautiful, even unfinished. It looked like hope. For a moment, I almost forgot the conversation with my father. Almost. Then the wind picked up, brushing the edge of the tarp over the drink table, and I felt that same unease settle back in my chest. It wasn't fear, exactly, just a sense that something was off. A small, sharp splinter under the skin. Emily came outside in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. You're up early, she said, yawning. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. She smiled, stepping beside me. It's gonna be fine, Mom. You always worry too much. I smiled faintly. You sound like your father. She grinned. That's a compliment, right? Her dad, my ex-husband, lived 2 states away now. We'd split when Emily was 9, and though things were civil between us, we didn't talk much. He was supposed to fly in for the graduation, but last week he'd called to say he couldn't make it. Work emergency. Of course. Emily took it in stride. She always did. But I knew it hurt. Maybe that's why I wanted this celebration so badly. I wanted her to feel surrounded by love, not absence. By noon, the clouds had cleared and the air turned warm. Neighbors waved as they passed by, some stopping to ask about the party. Everyone seemed genuinely excited for Emily. It felt normal, comforting. For the first time in days, I felt like maybe everything would turn out fine. Then around 3, I got the text. It was from my mother. We need to talk. Please call me. I hesitated, staring at the screen. I could almost hear her voice in my head. Tentative, careful, trying to keep the peace. I stepped inside to call. She answered on the second ring. Honey, she said softly, I don't want to upset you, but your father, he's been saying some things. I think you should know. My stomach tightened. What kind of things? She hesitated. He's been calling people, old friends, saying you shouldn't be throwing this party, that it's disrespectful. Disrespectful? I repeated, my voice rising. To who? To Ryan Keller's family, she whispered. He says it's like tempting fate, celebrating the same way those kids did. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. Mom, that was 2 decades ago. Nobody even remembers that. He does, she said. and he's not letting it go. Something in her tone made me pause. What aren't you telling me? There was a long silence. Then quietly, he blames himself. I froze. For what? For that boy's death. The words hit me like cold water. I couldn't speak for a moment. What do you mean? It wasn't just a coworker's son, she said, voice trembling slightly. Your father was with him that day. They'd been working on a side project, some repair job at the warehouse. He dropped the boy off at the party afterward. He didn't know they were drinking, didn't think anything of it. But when the accident happened, he felt responsible. I leaned against the counter, trying to absorb it. He never told me that. He didn't tell anyone, she said. He just changed, became stricter, more controlling. Especially with you, he was terrified something like that would happen again. I sank into a chair, the phone pressed against my ear. Mom, that's not my burden to carry. And it's definitely not Emily's. I know, she whispered. I tried to tell him, but he's convinced something bad will happen if you go through with it. Please, just be careful. Careful? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping before I could stop it. We're throwing a graduation party, not summoning ghosts. But after I hung up, I couldn't shake the chill that crawled down my spine. That evening, Emily's friends came by to help set up. The yard came alive with the sound of laughter and music, the clatter of plates, the hum of voices. For the first time in years, the house felt full. Not just of people, but of something bigger. Possibility, pride. As the sun dipped low, string lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over everything. Emily stood in the middle of it all, her face illuminated, her laughter echoing across the yard. I watched her from the porch, and something inside me swelled. That quiet, unspoken joy that only parents understand. I didn't notice the figure standing by the fence until the laughter died down. At first, I thought I was imagining it. A tall shape half hidden by the shadows near the back gate. Then I saw the way Emily's smile faltered as she looked past me. Mom, she said softly. Who's that? I turned, my heart skipping. It was my father. He stood just beyond the fence, his hands gripping the top rail, his expression unreadable. He wasn't supposed to be here. He hadn't called, hadn't said a word since our argument. The air seemed to still. The music faded, one of Emily's friends lowering the volume as if sensing the tension. I walked toward him slowly, forcing a smile. Dad, what are you doing here? He didn't answer right away. His eyes swept over the yard, the lights, the laughter, the decorations, like he was taking inventory of every detail. Finally, he said, I came to make sure you were safe. Safe? I echoed. From what? His gaze flicked toward the group of teenagers by the table. You're letting them drink. I frowned. They're not drinking, it's soda. He shook his head. It starts like that. You think you're in control, but you're not. It's all fun until something happens. I sighed, lowering my voice. Dad, please, not here, not tonight. But he stepped closer, his voice rising slightly. You think I'm being dramatic, but you don't know what it's like to live with regret, to watch it eat you alive. Then don't let it, I said firmly. Let it go. This isn't about you. His eyes met mine, cold, almost pleading. It's always about me. You just don't realize it yet. Before I could respond, Emily approached, her jaw set. Grandpa, please stop. You're making everyone uncomfortable. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something flickered in his face. Not anger, not disappointment. Something closer to fear. Don't go out tonight, he said quietly. Promise me. She frowned. What are you talking about? I'm not going anywhere. Promise me, he repeated, his voice trembling. She hesitated, glancing at me. Okay, she said finally. I promise. He nodded once, then turned and walked away without another word. The silence that followed was thick and uneasy. The guests murmured softly, trying to make sense of what they'd seen. Emily looked at me, her eyes searching mine. What was that about? I swallowed hard. He's just struggling. He's not himself lately. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Maybe you should check on him tomorrow. I nodded too, though deep down something about the whole encounter gnawed at me. The way he'd looked at her, the urgency in his voice. After everyone went home, the house felt too quiet. Emily had gone to bed, exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, replaying every word, every look. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You shouldn't have ignored him. I froze. The message had no name, no number I recognized, just those words. I stood up, my heart pounding, and went to the window. The street was empty, still damp from the earlier rain. I double-checked the locks, then walked upstairs to make sure Emily was asleep. She was, her breathing soft and steady, the light from the hallway spilling across her desk piled with graduation cards. I went back downstairs and sat in the dark, staring at the phone. I wanted to believe it was a prank, maybe one of the kids joking around, but something about it felt deliberate. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. The curtains were drawn, the car still in the driveway. When I knocked, my mother answered. Her eyes red-rimmed, her hands trembling slightly. What's wrong? I asked immediately. She hesitated, glancing toward the living room. He's not well, she whispered. He didn't sleep. He keeps pacing, saying something's coming. I stepped past her, heart racing. My father was sitting in his chair, the TV off, a cup of untouched coffee beside him. He looked pale, distant, his hands gripping the armrest tightly. Dad, I said gently. What's going on? He looked up slowly. Did you get a message? My throat tightened. What? Last night? Did someone contact you? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, from an unknown number. How did you... He exhaled shakily, cutting me off. It's starting again. What is? He didn't answer. He just stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the street like he was watching for something. The same things that happened before, the same signs. You don't remember, but I do. I stepped closer. Dad, you're scaring me. He turned suddenly, his eyes intense. You think I'm crazy. But the night Ryan Keller died, I got a message too. Same kind of words, same timing. I ignored it. I stared at him, unable to speak. He was gone by morning, my father whispered. Do you understand now why I told you not to celebrate? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Don't let her go anywhere, he said firmly. Keep her home until the weekend passes. Please. There was such desperation in his voice that I couldn't argue, but a part of me still refused to believe this was anything more than paranoia. A tragic coincidence wrapped in guilt. I promised him I'd be careful, then left, driving home through streets that suddenly felt too empty, too quiet. When I got there, Emily was sitting on the porch steps, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, frowning. Mom, is everything okay? You look weird. I forced a smile. Yeah, just tired. Listen, maybe we should skip the post-grad bonfire this weekend. Just stay in, have our own little movie night instead. She raised an eyebrow. Why? Everyone's going. You said I could. I know, but I hesitated. Your grandfather's not feeling well, and I'd rather... She groaned, cutting me off. Mom, please, don't start turning into him. I'm not, I said quickly. You're both obsessed with bad things happening, she snapped. You can't live your whole life waiting for something to go wrong. The words stung more than they should have. She stormed inside, the door slamming behind her. For the rest of the day, she barely spoke to me. She spent hours in her room, texting friends, packing boxes for college. I tried to act normal, but that text message, as those 6 words, kept replaying in my mind. That night, after midnight, my phone buzzed again. You didn't listen. I barely slept that night. The house was too quiet, too dark. Every shadow seemed heavier. Every creak of the floorboards amplified. I kept checking Emily's door, listening for her breathing. It was there, slow, steady, but somehow it wasn't enough. That text message had rattled me more than I'd care to admit. You didn't listen. By sunrise, I was pacing the living room, coffee untouched, mind spinning. I tried calling my father, but the line went straight to voicemail. The city outside was Waking up in the normal, indifferent way, cars moving through intersections, birds pecking at the gutters, mail trucks humming along the curb, and yet inside me, a storm was building. I had decided I couldn't ignore it. I had to understand what was happening. The messages, my father's fear, the sudden, inexplicable tension in the air. I grabbed my phone and began searching through old messages, scrolling back months, even years, looking for anything unusual. Nothing. Then I realized the messages weren't from anyone I knew. They were carefully anonymous, calculated. The sound of a knock on the front door startled me. I jumped. My hands were shaking as I moved toward it. Emily's friends weren't due until later. Slowly, I opened the door and saw him standing there. My father. His hair was disheveled, eyes bloodshot, and his hands trembled slightly. "I had to come," he said, voice low. I can't, I can't stay there any longer." "Dad," I whispered, stepping aside. "What is happening? You look exhausted." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped inside and closed the door quietly. "I tried to warn you," he said finally. "I didn't want it to come this far." "Warn me about what?" I asked, my voice tight. He walked to the living room and sank into the sofa, rubbing his face with one hand. It started again, just like before. The warnings, the signs, the premonitions, the messages. I sat opposite him, mind racing. "Dad, you're saying the texts, these messages, they're connected to the accident?" "Yes," he whispered. "And they're back. 20 years later, on the eve of a celebration. The same pattern, the same timing. I knew it would happen again." I frowned, trying to make sense of it. "But Emily isn't me. She's not even the same family. Why would anyone?" He shook his head. "It's not anyone. It's the pattern. History doesn't like to be forgotten. People think the past is dead, but it lingers. It waits for moments like this to remind us." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was imagining things, that grief had turned into paranoia. But when I looked into his eyes, were bloodshot, haunted, desperate, I felt the weight of his memories. I saw a man who had carried a tragedy so deep that it had carved its way into his soul, leaving a shadow over everything he'd loved. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since the first message. Why now? He exhaled slowly. "Because she's ready to step into the world, just like you were. And the world hasn't changed. Some things never do." I wanted to shake him, to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong. But deep down, a part of me feared he wasn't. That maybe he was seeing something I couldn't. The rest of the morning passed in uneasy silence. Emily came down for breakfast, her hair still messy, her eyes bright with optimism. "Morning, Mom," she said cheerfully. "Guess what? I finished the guest list. Everyone's coming." I forced a smile. "That's great, honey." Her father and I exchanged a look, the one that said everything we weren't putting into words. I wanted to tell her to stay inside, to cancel the party, to hide. But the truth was, I couldn't take that joy away from her. Not after all her hard work, not after the sacrifices we'd made. By afternoon, neighbors began arriving. The yard buzzed with energy, the air filled with the scent of cut grass and blooming flowers. Emily flitted between guests, checking on lights, making sure everyone had a drink, laughing with a kind of abandon that made my chest ache with pride. And then it happened. A scream. It was high-pitched, frantic, tearing through the backyard like a shard of glass. My heart stopped. I dropped the glass I was holding, shattering it on the stone patio. Emily's friends froze. Guests turned, bewildered, eyes wide. I ran toward the sound, my feet pounding the wet grass. And I saw her, Emily, standing at the edge of the woods behind our house, staring into the shadows, frozen. "What is it? What happened?" I shouted, trying to reach her. She didn't respond. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then she took a step back, stumbled, and I caught her just before she fell. "What is it?" I asked again, shaking her gently. I I saw someone, she whispered, her voice trembling. By the trees. Someone standing there, watching us. I turned toward the tree line, but saw nothing. Only the gentle sway of branches, the soft rustle of leaves. My heart was racing, every instinct screaming. Mom! Emily's voice shook. I think, I think it's him. The person from the messages. I knelt down beside her, forcing her to look at me. Honey, there's nobody there. It's okay. You're safe. Her eyes were wide, terrified, but I could see she wanted to believe me. It felt real, she said softly. It's okay, I whispered, holding her close. It's okay. I scanned the yard, making sure the guests were still safe, that no one else had noticed the disturbance. But inside me, a cold realization set in. These weren't coincidences. The messages, the presence at the fence, the sudden terror. Something from the past was converging with the present, and I had no idea how to stop it. After a few hours, the party resumed, though the energy was subdued. Emily tried to smile, tried to joke with her friends, but I could see her tension. My father's words, his fear, the mysterious messages, they all hung over us, invisible and oppressive. That night, after everyone had left, Emily went to bed early. I stayed in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea, my thoughts racing. I needed answers. Something in the back of my mind whispered that the past wasn't done with us, that the story of Ryan Keller's death, my father's guilt, and the strange messages were connected in ways I didn't yet understand. I pulled out my laptop and began researching newspaper archives, local forums, even old police reports. One thing became clear: Ryan Keller's accident had left a trail of people who were never truly at peace. Friends who had drifted away, family who had moved, whispers of responsibility that no one had ever spoken aloud. And then, buried deep in an old forum post, I found a clue, a reference to a pattern of warnings, cryptic messages, and strange coincidences tied to moments of celebration in that same neighborhood. I read the post 3 times, my pulse quickening. Someone else had noticed it. Someone else had seen the pattern I'd only glimpsed through my father's fear. And they had called it something chilling: the echo of tragedy. It described events eerily similar to what I'd been experiencing: anonymous messages, sudden fears, shadows at the edge of perception. The post concluded with a warning. The pattern does not end until it has been confronted, not avoided. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Confronted? I didn't even know what that meant. How do you confront a pattern? How do you face a history that's been haunting your family for 20 years? And then I remembered the folder my father had shown me, the clippings, the documents, the yellowed newspaper articles. Something clicked. The messages, the fears, the warnings. They weren't random. They were a chain, a thread connecting him, me, and now Emily. And the only way to break it was to follow it to its source. I didn't want to. I wanted to protect Emily from the horrors of the past, to shield her from the guilt and fear that had shaped my father's life. But if the pattern truly existed, if it really was coming for her, then I had no choice. I looked at the clock. Midnight. The house was silent. Emily was asleep. And somewhere outside, I felt it. The sense of being watched, of being nudged by unseen forces, urging me forward. I whispered her name softly, almost as a prayer. Emily, I'll protect you, I promise. But deep down, I knew that protection wouldn't come from hiding. It would come from facing the past, from stepping into the shadows my father had spent decades avoiding, and uncovering the truth that had haunted our family for 20 years. And as I sat there, staring into the darkened living room, I realized that the story of Ryan Keller's death, the messages, the fear, the guilt, was far from over. It was only beginning. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the kitchen, but it brought no comfort. The yard outside was quiet, the remnants of yesterday's decorations glinting in the pale light. Emily had gone out early to meet a friend at the library, and the house felt emptier than usual. Too quiet, too still. Every sound seemed amplified: the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustle of leaves outside. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the laptop screen. I knew I couldn't ignore what was happening. The messages, the shadows, the sense of a past reaching out, I had to understand it. I began digging into every detail of Ryan Keller's accident, every report, every article, every minor footnote that might hold a clue. It became clear quickly that my father hadn't exaggerated. The accident had left a trail far more complex than I remembered. Witnesses reported strange occurrences, flickering lights, sudden cold drafts, even rumors of mysterious figures appearing near the roads that night. Most of it had been dismissed at the time as coincidence or youthful exaggeration. But now, looking back with the lens of what my father had warned me, it felt deliberate. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. Something about the pattern of these incidents was familiar, though I couldn't place it. Then I noticed a name that appeared repeatedly in the old reports: Michael Dane. He had been a friend of Ryan's, someone who had survived the accident that night, though barely. I cross-referenced him with local records, and to my surprise, he was still living nearby. Not far at all, and only a few blocks from my neighborhood. I felt a cold surge of fear. Could he be involved in the messages? Was he watching us now, waiting for some echo of the past? Before I could answer, the front door opened quietly. Emily had returned. She was carrying a bag of books and a cup of coffee from the library cafe, her hair slightly mussed, her eyes bright. "Mom, you won't believe what I found," she said, setting the bag down. "There's this old yearbook. Ryan Keller's class. He had some kind of something weird. Everyone was talking about him, like he could see things or, I don't know, people thought he was cursed or something." I froze. "Cursed?" She nodded. "Yeah, the kids said that the night he died, he predicted it or warned someone or something. I couldn't really make sense of it, but Mom, feels connected. The messages, everything." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. "Emily, I need you to be careful. I think, I think this is bigger than we realized, bigger than just scary messages." Her eyes narrowed. "Mom, are you saying someone's trying to hurt me?" "No," I said quickly. "Not exactly, but I think something from the past is lingering. And we need to understand it before it does anything. We need to find out what really happened that night." Her expression softened slightly, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was strong, capable, and stubborn. Exactly like her father, I thought bitterly. By late afternoon, I decided to visit my father. I needed answers, more than he had given me in hurried explanations or cryptic warnings. Maybe seeing the source of his fear firsthand would help me untangle this mess. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. My mother met me at the door, her eyes wide. He's He hasn't left his chair," she said. "He hasn't slept. He's been muttering about patterns and cycles and repeating history." I stepped inside and found him exactly as she said, hunched in the recliner, papers scattered across the coffee table, old clippings, photographs, and notes jotted in his uneven handwriting. He looked up at me with tired, haunted eyes. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice low. "We don't have much time. The pattern, it's accelerating." "Accelerating?" I echoed. "Yes," he said. "Every time a celebration approaches, every time someone steps into what we did not survive, the echoes grow stronger. And now, it's Emily." I swallowed hard. "Dad, you've been warning me. But I need to know what happened that night. I need the truth, not fear, not guilt. The truth." He sighed, leaning back. "The truth is more complicated than you remember. That night, Ryan Keller wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Something was following him, something that shouldn't exist. And we ignored it. I ignored it. And he paid the price." "Following him?" I asked, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" He looked at me with a strange intensity. "There are cycles, forces. Call them what you will. Some people feel them. Some people survive them. Ryan didn't. And the echoes, the warnings, the messages, the shadows you've seen, they're part of that cycle. And now it's here again. Because Emily, She's stepping into the same kind of celebration, the same threshold. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. Dad, this sounds like something out of a story, a myth. He slammed his hand on the table, startling me. It isn't a myth. I've lived it. I've carried it. And I refuse to let it happen again. To you, to her. But you think the past doesn't matter. You think joy can exist without consequence. You're wrong. I could feel tears rising, not just from fear, but from the weight of everything. My father's guilt, the mystery, the danger hovering over Emily. Dad, I understand why you're scared, but I can't let fear rule our lives. Emily deserves to celebrate. She deserves happiness. His eyes softened slightly, almost reluctantly. I know. That's why I need you to understand it, to confront it, because if we don't, the echoes won't stop. And this time, they could take her. A shiver ran down my spine. Confront it? How? He reached under the table and pulled out a small, battered notebook. Inside were diagrams, lists, and sketches. Maps of streets, trees, houses, notes on timing, moon phases, the placement of lights at the party. This is everything I recorded after the accident. Every sign, every pattern I could trace. If we're going to survive this we have to follow it. Piece by piece. We have to understand it. And then we have to act. I looked down at the notebook, my hands trembling. The handwriting was jagged, frantic in places. But the details, the dates, the cross-references were meticulous. I realized then that my father's fear wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. He had been trying to protect us, even if it meant carrying his guilt silently for 20 years. I nodded slowly, determination hardening inside me. Okay, then we do it. Together, I'll help you. And I'll protect Emily, I promise. He exhaled, a mixture of relief and lingering fear. Good, because there's no turning back now. As I drove home that evening, the sky turning gold over the rooftops, I thought of Emily. Sleeping upstairs, unaware of the storm circling closer, the unseen weight pressing down. And I knew the next few days would change everything. The party, the celebration, the past, all of it was converging. I had no choice. I had to follow the trail, trace the patterns, confront the echoes of tragedy, and just maybe, we could finally break the cycle. But as I parked outside the house, my phone buzzed again. Another message, the same ominous, faceless warning. It's already begun. The morning of Emily's graduation arrived in a surreal hush. The air felt lighter, almost fragile, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for us to act. I checked the backyard one last time. The tables, the lights, the mason jars, everything exactly as Emily had arranged. She moved among it all with her usual enthusiasm, unaware of the storm we had narrowly skirted. I knew the pattern was still there. I could feel it, that same prickling at the base of my neck, the sense that someone, something, was watching, testing us. But I also knew this. Fear could no longer dictate our lives. The past could no longer have power over the present. I met my father in the living room one final time. His eyes were softer now, less haunted, tempered by a cautious hope. "You're ready," he said quietly. "Whatever comes, trust yourself. Trust her." I nodded. There was a moment of silence, a fragile peace settling between us. We had traced the patterns, confronted the shadows, faced the echoes of tragedy, and in doing so, we'd begun to sever their hold. The ceremony itself was everything. Was Emily had dreamed of. The auditorium was bright, full of proud families and laughing friends. I sat in the third row, heart swelling with emotion as she walked across the stage, accepting her diploma with poise and joy. When she smiled at me, that radiant, unstoppable smile, something inside me finally unclenched. The past was behind us, or at least we had made it part of our story rather than our master. Afterward, we returned home for the celebration. My father lingered at the edge of the yard, watching, uncertain but unwilling to intrude. Emily's friends ran through the sprinklers, the string lights casting playful shadows on the grass. Music played softly in the background, and for the first time, I allowed myself to exhale fully. Later, as the last of the guests trickled away, Emily sat beside me on the porch swing. Her hair was damp from the sprinklers, her face glowing with happiness. "Mom," she said softly, "this was perfect. I feel like everything is finally okay." I hugged her tightly, holding on as if to make sure the feeling lasted. "It is, honey, it really is." I glanced toward my father, standing quietly by the fence. He met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. That silent gesture spoke more than words: acknowledgement, reconciliation, the passing of a burden finally shared. I realized then that the cycle had broken not because of warnings or messages, not because of fear or guilt, but because we chose to face it together. That night, after Emily went to bed, I sat on the porch alone, looking at the glow of the remaining string lights. The quiet was different now, not oppressive, but reflective. The shadows that had once loomed seemed smaller, harmless even. The air smelled of lilacs and freshly cut grass, a reminder that life moves forward, no matter the weight of the past. I thought about my father, about the years of fear he had carried, and about the lessons hidden in that fear. I thought about Emily, about how joy can exist even in the shadow of history if you're brave enough to claim it. And I thought about myself, the way I had nearly let the past dictate her future, and how close we had come to losing sight of what really mattered. I whispered into the night, more to myself than anyone else, "We survived. We really did." And then I asked the questions I knew I would never have definitive answers to, but that mattered nonetheless. How much of our lives are truly our own, and how much are shaped by the shadows of those who came before us? When does caution become fear and fear become a prison? And how do we choose, in moments of uncertainty, to honor the past without letting it control the future? I didn't have answers, but I had hope. And sometimes hope is enough. Now for the audience. How often do we let the past dictate our present, even when the danger is only in our minds? When facing fear, do we protect ourselves at the cost of joy, or do we risk it all for love and celebration? What patterns in your own life might you be repeating without realizing it? And how could confronting them change the story you tell yourself and others?